What's up, YouTube? Another voiceover league of Grixis, just off-camera league. We played Rakdos yesterday on stream, Rakdos and Demir. I think we went like 2-3 in Demir, 3-2 in Rakdos. I'll be like chopping those up out of the VOD and uploading them to YouTube. But this was just a separate league I ran through with Grixis. Not too much. I went back to cutting the DRCs, going back up to the 4th Ledger Shredder, the 4th Drown in the Lock, 3rd Croxa, 20th Land. Just, I haven't found like an exact configuration that I'm comfortable with, but I've been kind of enjoying going back and forth so I can go league to league, seeing like, all right, DRC is looking good here. Croaks is looking a little better here. Ledger Shredder is looking okay here. What do I want the balance to look like? Sideboard. I think it's the same as the last one we ran. I might be up a Kaito. I can't remember if I ran 2 last time. But up on like Flusterstorms and Spell Pierces overall to help with the Cascade matchups. Dress down up over Alpine Moon because I'm more concerned about like elementals or having some flexibility against decks like elementals than I am against Tron. Foreshadowing. Cut the second unlicensed hearse. Yeah, just trying to find some sort of balance in the sideboard that I like. I haven't really found like a configuration I'm really sold on yet. So you'll just see me flipping around a bunch. But either way, let's just go ahead and get into the matches. Move some of these screenshots and stuff around. All right. So match number 1 of that league. Lose the die roll. I do think I know I like point out the die roll every single time because I do think it is a pretty important factor. There's a lot of decks in the format that can really out tempo being on the play. Looking at like Hammer Time, the Murktide decks with like Ragavan into Counterspell, the Rhinos decks with turn 1 land, turn 2 ice down a land, turn 3 Rhinos, stuff like that. Creativity has got similar draws to Rhinos, like turn 1 land, turn 2 Renin 6, or ice down a land, turn 3 Fable the Mirror Breaker, and you're really getting behind on the roll there. So I do think it's important to take note of like, all right, is your deck capable of winning on the draw? Because if you're not, that's going to be a really tough sell. But let's go ahead and see what we got. Reveal our Pokemon. Opening hand, no red mana, so I got to throw this one back. Basic Island. I know Basic Island and Croxa. Fire and Ice, just clashing. Bear with me through the league. All right, much better hand. We've got our mana figured out. We've got some threats. We've got some interaction. This is usually like a pretty tough choice when it comes to mulliganing. Like, what aspect of this hand really feels weak? Like, we want the threats. We want the interaction. Where is kind of like our hang up coming from? You can make an argument for literally any card in the hand is keep or mulligan, which is always tough. Like turn 1 Ragavan's one of our best plays, but being on the draw, if our opponent has like turn 1 land, turn 2 Renin 6, then Ragavan looks awful. We could keep we could throw back the Ledger Shredder, but if our opponent plays to the board, then Ragavan could just be stonewalled and we have no threat to help us get through. We could throw back Thoughtseize, but what if we're against an unfair matchup? In which case, like Lightning Bolt looks really bad. Ledger Shredder doesn't look that good. So we'd be throwing away like one of our best pieces there. We could throw back Spell Pierce. If we're up against a creature matchup, Spell Pierce could be really bad. But again, if we're up against like Cascade or something, then Spell Pierce is one of our only ways of dealing with Rhinos cleanly. Um, Lightning Bolt, we could throw back Lightning Bolt. But if we're on the draw against a Ragavan deck and we play a Ragavan or Thoughtseize, they either get to kill our Ragavan and attack through, or we Thoughtseize and they get to attack through. So that's a pretty tough one. I think for me, it's kind of between Ragavan or Thoughtseize, and it's mainly because turn one, I want to do something kind of proactive. So I'm leaning towards Ragavan. I think Ragavan's a little bit better against both the fair and the unfair matchups if it sticks around. So I'm gonna throw back the Thoughtseize. It's mainly because my opponent plays out like an impactful creature. I might not be playing the Ragavan anyway. So Young Wolf means Yawgmoth. Unfortunately, we are going to play the Ragavan here because I don't want to just spend the front half of a Lightning Bolt killing the front half of a Young Wolf. I don't think that does a tremendous amount for me. So we got Wall of Roots. Okay. We could sit here and like attack with Ragavan. They block with Young Wolf. We bolt the Young Wolf and get that off the board. That's okay. It's not great. Realistically, like none of our plays are particularly great. All right. So opponent gets down to Strangleroot Geist. So we're just gonna attack in for whatever we got. Like when they start getting multiple undying creatures out, I'm a lot more interested in using some of my spells to get undying creatures off the board. Like this Ragavan is never getting through again. Between Young Wolf, Strangleroot Geist, Wall of Roots, a potential Yawgmoth, like Ragavan is a dead card. If you sit here and try to like wait for your opponent to tap low so you can attack him with Ragavan, it's very, very likely not happening. So I'm pretty okay just trading off Ragavan and a removal spell for one of these undying threats, just to make a Yawgmoth potentially worse. Kind of the same thing with this, making Yawgmoth worse, getting a Ledger Shredder trigger. Opponent chooses not to attack, so I'm assuming that they've got a Court of Calling. Not really a lot of reasons they wouldn't make that attack there. Endurance. So I could have played around Endurance by shocking in the Watery Grave and playing the Kroxa. But I was not planning on playing the Kroxa. I was planning on just getting like a basic and adding Giganta to my hand. Because if my opponent didn't attack with a Strangleroot Geist and they have a wall, I'm expecting a Court of Calling and I want to hold up Spell Pierce for that. I can always like play another land next turn and escape Kroxa. But if my opponent gets like a Yawgmoth down here, I have no chance. So I was not playing around Endurance. If I was planning on playing Kroxa, I would have just shocked in the Watery Grave. But I was not, so I didn't. Here we are. Cracks in for 6. And this looks like it is going to be the Cord. So thankfully we get to Spell Pierce that. Getting value, getting to convert on that Spell Pierce is huge. Then we'll drop down Gigantha. Finding Shadow is really good, so now we can actually start attacking. I'm going to play out these things anyway, so I'm playing them out first to get this first Connive trigger. If my opponent wants to trade out like an Endurance, like double block Endurance plus Strangleroot Geist to kill this Gigantha, I'm okay with that because I get Endurance off the board, which means the Ledger Shredders can start getting through. I'm just hoping to get a whiff here. But as soon as we get Drown in the lock, I think we're in reasonable shape. Like, I get to make this attack. I put them, or 2 more cards in their graveyard. They really need to block both because if they don't, they're dead to Lightning Bolt with the Gigantha. So that's kind of risky. They've already seen. Yeah, I had a Lightning Bolt earlier that they got back, or they put back with Endurance. So they've seen Lightning Bolt. They know the cards in my deck. So going to 2 is fairly risky. They double block, which gets them up to 7 cards in the yard, which means if they cord for 4, I can Drown in the Locket. So I'm effectively just holding this Drown in the Lock for anything I can possibly hit. Opponent misses, and so next turn we'd be able to just like attack with probably Gigantha, Shadow, and the 3/5 Shredder, and hold back this other Shredder in case they have like double Strangleroot Geist. But anyway, that's game number 1. On to game number 2. Sideboarding against Yawgmoth. Spell Pierce is really bad, so that comes out. Ragavan's really bad. Those are coming out. Thoughtseize is not terrible, but I've been a little bit more on boarding those out because I have so many like dress downs post board. So I'm bringing in things like the 3 dress downs, the 2 engineered explosives, the unlicensed hearse. Brought in the Kaitos here just as the ability to gain a little bit of card advantage. If I'm attacking in with like Ledger Shredder, then I'm kind of hoping Kaito can help draw a little bit more. But I could very well see like the Thought Seizes over Kaito. I think that's fine. And the last card in was the Terminate. But most importantly, it's like bringing in the Dress Downs, the Unlicensed Hearse. Those are some of my better cards in the matchup. I hate this hand. Like, having Dress Down doesn't do a whole lot if you don't have removal, but it's kind of hard to throw back, like, a functional-ish hand. Opponent's on a mull, so we're just hoping to, like, find some piece of interaction. If they have turn 2 Grist, kind of sucks. Definitely incentivize killing the mana dork if you can to stop this sort of situation. So Grist straight into the Yawgmoth. I just decided to kill off the Ledger Shredder. Like, I'm actually not upset with this turn of events. I was getting them to completely lose their board just to get like a couple cards off Yawgmoth is kind of okay. Response to the wall, we're going to dress down so they can't just sack their 2 guys and get rid of Shadow. If they want to sack their insect token, that's fine. If they had gotten a, what's it called? Dryad Arbor, I would have been in a little more trouble. But String Root Geist is fine. So unfortunately, they can't just like sack everything into turn. But they don't get to kill it and get an attack in. Just trying to find a way to kill a Yawgmoth. So I think we end up just scooping it up pretty soon. The Eldritch Evolution, go get a draw off Messenger. So this would be 2 off Messenger. I'm down to 16. Yawgmoth hit to 14, and then Grist ult for 4 more. So dead on board. Probably could have mulled that hand a little more aggressively to help fight a turn 1 mana dork. But get to go to game 3 on the play regardless. Don't really want multiple EEs. The rest of the hand's a little clunky as well. Like Shadow's not getting online anytime soon. Ledger Shredder, I would rather hold the bauble until I play the Shredder, but if I hold the bauble, I might not hit the second land and be able to play the Shredder. So throw that back, get a much better 6. Get to turn 1 interaction. I've got turn 2 interaction for 1 drop. I've got a threat. So I'm just going to throw back the engineered explosives here. Between like Thoughtseize and Drown in the Lock, I'm probably going to be able to interact with like their 1 drops pretty well. So I figure EE might not be the most efficient use of removal there. Thoughtseize sees Blood Artist, Wall of Roots, Yawgmoth, and Dryad Arbor in hand is important to note. For the most part, none of this is particularly scary as it's playing out. I think Yawgmoth is probably best card in hand, but with like the Thoughtseize, the Misty, if I get to Drown in the Lock, the Dryad, they're a ways off of this Yawgmoth, so I'm just going to take the Wall of Roots to kind of stop them from developing their mana a bit, give me time to get Shredder down, get draws going. So hopefully I can pull ahead a little bit on like the card selection front. Throw away the land because between the draw off of Bauble, the draw for turn, and the dress down, like I'm hoping I can find another land. If it finds another wall, go ahead and kill that. Blood Artist is fine. I'm kind of surprised that they're not playing out the Dryad Arbor. I kind of figured that would be one that they'd want to go ahead and get out on the field sooner rather than later. Like the longer they wait on that, kind of the worse it is coming into play, Summoning Sickness. But I get at the same time that if I like strip mine the Dryad Arbor, then that's pretty bad for developing their turns. So they play out Yawgmoth. I'm fine with that because if they sack the Blood Artist, like that's great for me. So I don't see that happening. We're gonna EOT Dress down. This is 2 reasons. 1, keep them from like Yawgmoth shenanigans on my turn. So if I find a way to maybe kill the Blood Artist, I get a 4th card in the yard. I can Drown in the Lock the Yawgmoth. Also because of Kroxa, if I find a land and I'm able to like kill something and just hard cast a 6/6 Kroxa for 2 mana, then that's a really good way for me to kind of pull ahead. That's a nightmare card for them to deal with if I have it out on the battlefield and like my mana situated. And we find the 4th land. So we do get to kill the Yawgmoth, attacking because if the Blood Artist blocks, sweet. Play out Kroxa. And they go get a Shieldred. So we're sitting on this Drown in the Lock. Pretty good against an opposing Shieldred. Get a big Kraken, just see what we draw off the Fiery Islet, and opponent scoops it up. So we get a lot of value from being able to dress down into Croxa there, but reasonable for just having good removal. So able to kill like the Yawgmoth, able to kill the Shieldred, and just happen to find our land drops in time. So good job, deck. On to match number 2. Win the die roll. Woo. Having a die roll win with a Ragavan on turn 1 into interaction for their 1 drop. Really difficult to throw that back. 4 lands is a bit rough, but kind of have to take what you take. Dead and gone means more than likely Rhinos here. It looked like they were starting to cast something and didn't. So I don't know what they would be casting for 1 red, but they pass turn, go to Isis, so cool. No main phase Cascade. I'm guessing they think we've got Drown in the Loch and they're planning on like Outburst on our turn. Find a Shadow and a Thoughtseize. So Thoughtseize doesn't get us Delirium or anything, but we are going to be able to get our life total down so we can get this Shadow online if they do have like an Outburst here. Yep, we just want to take whatever their follow-up is. Fury and 4 lands. Sure. It goes for attack. We'll get a little bit of damage out of the way. Croxa here gives me Delirium. So now I've actually got the ability to play the Swamp, Unholy Heat a Rhino, and Terminate a Rhino. Or not Croxa gives me Delirium. Terminate gives me Delirium for Unholy Heat. Croxa is just there to, pop them for 3. And we know that they didn't draw. I guess they could draw Force of Negation and a blue card. So it's probably better to do that on their upkeep. Either way, here we are. That's absolutely fine because if they haven't drawn another live spell, they're dead to Croxa plus Bolt. So we'll start with Croxa, see if we can deal 3 to them if they don't have anything to discard. And they do not, so we'll fire a Bolt upstairs. Pretty good game 1 win. So even with the Rhinos, Croxa showing that it can carry the weight. So Croxa did 6 points there. We had Bolt. If we had Underworld Breach, it would have been the same because we would have bolted into turn, untap Breach for 2 more bolts is 9. So yeah, either one would have gotten the win there. Game number 2 against Rhinos. Sideboarding, boarded out bolts because they don't kill a Rhino. Usually trim on Ragavan, especially on the draw, because like with Dead and Gone, Fire and Ice, Fury, they've got a lot of ways of dealing with it. Boarded out a Croxa because I don't want to be in a situation where I find too many Croxas and they find like Endurance. Boarded out a Terminate because it's less efficient than like Unholy Heat at killing a single Rhino. And then I had one more card I wanted to bring in because I was boarding in 3 Flusterstorm, 2 spell pierce, and 2 engineered explosives. So it's the 2 terminate for the 2 EE, Croxa and Ragavan for the 2 spell pierces, and then Thoughtseize 2 lightning bolts for the 3 fluster storms. I'd probably just rather board out another Ragavan than the Thoughtseize on the draw. So a little bit of a sideboarding mishap there. So slow hand on the draw, but we do have like Ledger Shredder, which gets some connive triggers. We've got iterations to kind of help us find what's it called? Find like EEs. And then also of importance, we have all of our basics covered because this could get the basic island, which we end up drawing anyway. But the fact that we have our basics covered means we're not like dead in the water to a blood moon. So I'm kind of hoping I can like win the long game with EE helping me find or iteration helping me find EE and like Ledger Shredder. Eventually outsizing Rhinos. I just have to deal with like bounce spells for a little bit. Not playing my basics out here because I kind of like don't want my opponent to know that I've got the basics. So if they just spend one of their turns like casting a Blood Moon, yeah, you got it. Fable of the Mirror Breaker was not on my radar. But we do get to just get down a couple shadows here. If they have Land Fury, it's going to suck. But if they don't have the land and they have to like attack with the Shaman token, then we can block around that to grow our shadows past Fury. I mean, they go for the Blood Moon. I get to play out my basics and say like, oh yeah, see, we got basics. It's all good. Get a Croxa trigger in. So I'm really thinking that my opponent has got like a Fury in hand and just looking for that 5th land. Maybe they think that I've got a lightning bolt, so they don't want to like evoke Fury and have me bolt myself and the shadows live. But obviously finding engineered explosives is pretty good for me. Seeing Rhinos on top of their library means cool, no Fury next turn because I'm going to EE, take out the tokens. Fire another shadow is fine. We'll go ahead and take out the tokens. So they can suspend this footfalls. That's pretty okay with me. I'm just going to keep chunking along. And I'm basically not going to tap off of Dress Down now. But as soon as I get this Gigantha resolved, then I'll be able to get back the Croxa. And I'm hoping that that'll be enough to kind of get me across the finish line. Wasn't expecting petty theft, but I get to kind of convert on this spell pierce now. So that's a win. They can't have drawn both land and fury, so I feel confident that I'm going to be able to get back my Croxa here. And they scoop it up. So very nice win because I had access to the basic island. And I was still able to get back Croxa despite of it through a Blood Moon. So really like that. Let me grab some water real quick. I'll be right back. And guess we got match number 3 coming up. Let y'all dwell on this for a second. Water achieved. So, let's get on to match number 3. We're on the draw. Eventually, yeah, reveal Gigantha. Our opponent also reveals the Gigantha. So, if our opponent's revealing a Gigantha, I'm kind of assuming it's going to be a bit of a mid-range mirror. I might not want to mulligan because we're up against like Prowess or a Saga deck, like a Jun Saga or Zoo or something. Then having access to a bunch of cards is going to be very determining. So I think I'm going to roll with this, even though it is a little slower. Not Prowess, not Zoo. Kroxa at least gives us a threat, so we'll take that. Opponent starting off with Tronland Forest for Sylvan Scrying. So they probably don't have Tron rolled up already. That being said, they could find it very easily. I thought about dashing here. Maybe I should have to try to set up iteration for next turn. But I figured like, hey, I'll hard cast the Ragavan so I don't have to invest a bunch of mana in that from now on. And they have Warping Whale, so dashing probably would have been like the safer option. But I kind of figure like my hand isn't looking too great right now anyway. So the Spell Pierce, grab a land, so hopefully I can fight over something this turn. Opponent finds their third Tron land and plays out Gigantha. So I kind of wonder if they had like 2 Tron lands and still chose to play the Sylvan Scrying on 2, or if they naturally drew the third Tron land right there. Kroxa ditches the Sylvan Scrying out of them. So they had plenty of Tron lands going on. And we'll scoop to Ulamog. So have second tower. I think we saw second tower off of. Maybe we didn't. Never mind. Yeah, just Tron things. Also looks pretty rough because we didn't bring in, or we don't have Alpine Moon in this league. So cut a bunch of Unholy Heats, cut a Drown, cut Terminates, brought in like a couple dress downs to maybe pair with Kroxa to get it online sooner, or the pseudo Battle Rage Shadow mode. Make your Shadow at 13/13. Brought in the 3 Fluster Storms and the 2 Spell Pierces. Spell Pierce is like a little better counter early game to be able to hit map, mana rocks, whatever. But Fluster Storm can also hit like Ancient Stirrings. It can hit Sylvan Scrying, Warping Whale. If your opponent's running like Spatial Contortion or something, it can hit that. So it's certainly not dead. Go away. Reveal our Gigantha. Opening hand had no lands. This 7 or this 6 has no red mana, so we're shipping that. Not the best 5, but yeah, got to keep this 4. Ragavan, a few lands. Like, I'm really just hedging on Ragavan really, really heavily. And kind of hoping that maybe Flusterstorm will let me tag something. But if your opponent keeps 7 and goes turn 1 Forest, Ancient Stirrings, miss a Tron land, like, you feel a little bit better about an aggressive mulligan decision. Let's get down Ledger Shredder. They go for the Sylvan Scrying, so we get value out of this Flusterstorm. We're now empty-handed on turn 2 against Tron, so, you know, Hashtag just shadow things. All right, come on. Moto. Moto. I'm going to sit here awkwardly while it waits. There we go. Kind of fast forwarding. All right. So our hope is to be able to hit like a Karn the Great Creator off the top of their library. Lightning Bolt, not quite it. All right, Moto, why are you being so laggy? Ragavan gets a star. We'll crack the star because that means we can bolt and get a surveil trigger or connive trigger. Sorry, that thing. They find a map. Still don't have a second Tron land, so we are safe at the moment. Kind of. So apparently we just have to rotate back and forth between like hitting the fast forward button and the normal play button. So attack in. Ragavan does hit Karn, which we're going to play out. We go get unlicensed hearse. I get hearse for two reasons. One, I can play it out to go ahead and get a connive trigger. And two, it gives me a threat. All right. Can we stop the speed up? All right. Two reasons. One, it gives me a second spell to get connive right away. Two, it gives me a threat because not only can I like eat some stuff and eventually crew the hearse, I can tick up Karn the Great Creator on it and make it into a 2/2 so it can attack in addition to like my Ragavan and my Ledger Shredder. If I got EE, I wouldn't be able to tick it up or tick up Karn on that to make an attacker. So this kind of gave me like a cheeky little way to get some damage in. For this turn we couldn't see there, we ended up finding Kroxa. They ditched an O-Stone because they wouldn't be able to activate it with Karn anyway. They don't find anything relevant, and we're able to get through for lethal with our Ledger Shredder and Ragavan, or what would be lethal on the next turn. But next turn, I also ticked up Karn. I could have ticked down Karn again and gone and gotten like an EE. I ticked up Karn intentionally to get it above 3 loyalty. So if my opponent did play a Tron land and an Ugin, they wouldn't be able to just like shoot my Karn and turn on their artifacts. Which might not be relevant, but if they like played Ugin, minus it, got rid of Ledger Shredder, whatnot, I'd still be able to tick up on the hearse. So let's go to game number 3. Game number 3 on the draw. V Tron. Tron's also like the only reason that I ever put an Alpine Moon in my board. Like, Saga's annoying and Alpine Moon's good against Saga, but I'd almost always just rather have more dress downs since they're a little more flexible. But if I'm running an Alpine Moon, it's more than likely because I've seen a bunch of Tron recently. And of course, as soon as I cut the Alpine Moon, Tron comes out of the woodwork. So, reasonable opening hand. We've got turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Shredder plus Bobble, maybe discard Kroxa. Find a third land, get Shadow down. Tron land map is always terrifying, but they only have one Tron land. So that's a little interesting. Thoughtseize could take like a worm coil, it could take an O stone. I kind of figure I'd rather lean towards maybe like O stone because they can play it out on turn 3 and crack it later if they don't hit Tron. I guess I'd take Warping Whale so that I can get down the Shredder and the Bauble without fear of Shredder dying. Top deck Ancient Stirrings is really annoying because we didn't hold up the Spell Pierce on turn 1 because I figured if they kept 7 and played Tron land map, my thought is they've got a second Tron land. So like Spell Pierce isn't doing anything for me. If I'd known that they didn't have Tron land, then playing the Spell Pierce or holding up the Spell Pierce obviously would have been a lot better to stop like Sylvan Scrying or something. Something they could use to help find a second Tron land so they know what to get to map. Most of the time, like, you don't want to crack map until you know what you're going to get. So if a Tron opponent plays a map, then usually it means they know what they're wanting to get, or they're just using their mana that they have available in a situation like what just happened. So now we look a little silly for not taking a Worm Coil engine, but at the same time, like, we probably couldn't beat the first Worm Coil engine, let alone the second one. And I definitely don't think we could beat O-Stone. Ditches a backup tower, so we know their hand is Worm Coil, and Worm Coil, unknown, third Tron land. We're just going to try to see if we can sneak in a little bit of damage over the top. Maybe get down this second Shredder so that if our opponent plays the other Worm Coil, maybe they play like attack with Worm Coil and play a second Worm Coil. We hit for 3 here, put them to 11. They hit us for 6, put us to 5. They go up to 17. We play out Shadow. Shadow's an 8/8. Or if they attack, Shadow becomes an 8/8. Like, all right, so my hope here is that I can figure out, like, Ledger Shredder plus Shadow, connive something I don't need. This Shredder becomes a 4/6. I attack for 4, put them to 10. Pass the turn. Or play like pass the turn with double Shredder, double Shadow out. They attack with Worm Coil, put me down to 5. My Shadows become 8/8. So they go up to 16. Shadows an 8/8. They've got an untapped Worm Coil out. I get to maybe find like a fetch land or something. Or maybe like expressive iteration and iteration, find a fetch land, play the fetch land, attack in with everything. So I'd have a 4/6 Shredder at 2 8/8 Shadows attacking in. They block a Shadow. I fetch and shock down to 2. So Shadow becomes an 11/11. I drown and lock the Shadow that they're blocking. And connive because I cast like expressive iteration or whatever already. Shredder grows to a 5/7, Shadows an 11/11. I deal exactly 16 to them. That's my hope. That's the line that I've come up with that is at least somewhat kind of reasonable. Obviously, I screw that up by not a Shredder and Shadow first here because I didn't think about it. And then I decided, like, I'm just going to hold up Drown. Stupid. Should not have just held up Drown. I get kind of rewarded for my opponent casting an O-Stone here. Or no, I knew about the O-Stone. We knew they had O-Stone. So a little bit less stupid there. Then they just Karn for an EE, and I'm like, well, crap. I do not believe I can beat Karning for an EE there. So I cannot attack for lethal through this Worm Coil. I can, like, Ledger Shredder, kill the Karn, and drown, like, the new Worm Coil engine. But that's not the most exciting thing in the world. Then for whatever reason, I'm just like, I don't want to take 6 here. I can't afford to take 6. I don't think any of it really mattered. Like, as soon as they had Karn and EE, and then we croaks of them, and they ditch a Cityscape Leveler, and we're like, yeah, we got nothing. So opponent's just gonna, like, unearth the Cityscape Leveler here, attack, exile the Shredder, and that's lethal. So it was like a combination of had a line that could have gotten us there, didn't follow the line, got rewarded for not following the line because I had forgotten about the O-Stone in hand. But then it didn't matter anyway because they had the Karn. And yeah, like, emotional roller coaster there. Like, in the end, I think as soon as our opponent top decked the turn 2 Ancient Stirrings to find one of the missing Tron lands, I think the game was, like, over at that point. But this is match number 4. Yeah. Another Gigantha revealed, so of course I'm on edge thinking, like, all right, it's Tron again. I don't want to deal with Tron again. 4-lander, no threat, plus the basic island. Few too many things for me to want to deal with. Much better. We've got Thoughtseize into Shadow. Just throw back the Unholy Heat. So I've got, like, turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 either drown in the lock something, play the Shredder, play the Shadow, do something proactive. Opponent reveals that they are on Prowess. So let's take the Sprite Dragon, the big flying dude. Turn 2, we'll just drown in the lock the Soulscar Mage. So hopefully they whiff on threats for a turn and I'm able to just, like, stabilize a little bit. So Bobble and Bloodstained Mire, we didn't know about either of those. So they showed us both of the cards we didn't know about. Thought about going Shredder into Shadow, but, like, I didn't want to discard the Shadow anyway. If I did find something good, and Shadow's, like, a really, really quick clock, so decided to just play that out. Get on the front foot some. And of course that means we just draw a whole bunch of Shadows, which is completely fine because, hey, that's a very real clock. Opponent could kill us if they have Sprite Dragon and Lightning Bolt is their two unknowns. So like playing Ledger Shredder would have given me a way to help around second Sprite Dragon. But attack in. Opponent decides to fetch, cast the mutagenic growth, which is completely okay with me. I'm kind of thinking they got like a second mutagenic growth here, which would be fine because I can just play out the Ledger Shredder post combat and stand in front of the Dragon's Rage Channeler, but they end up not having a second mutagenic growth or like a lightning bolt or anything. So I just get to keep my two shadows alive, play Croxa to get their last card out of hand, which should be unknown. They had the Arid Mesa already. They cast mutagenic growth. So yeah, we didn't know their last card. But getting cards out of hand is good. And not like dealing more damage to myself means I'm not dead to Underworld Breach for double bolt off the top. Reasonable opening hand. Turn 1, Heat a Threat. Turn 2, Shredder plus Bobble. Iteration to start kind of finding cards after that. I'm usually pretty okay with like main phasing Unholy Heat like this. If my opponent does have a mutagenic growth, like keeping the Soul Scar Mage alive is kind of annoying, but they do use that like on my turn, lose a Prowess trigger, lose some extra damage. So be it. Attack in for a couple. And I'm fine playing the basic here. I know I can't play expressive iteration off this, but I'm not planning on casting that iteration soon anyway. And now that I found a shadow, I can just like play out double shadow next turn, hold up Unholy Heat with Delirium. So I'm really not casting an expressive iteration anytime soon. Let's go ahead and double spell pre-combat to get our Shredder trigger. Terminate seems pretty good. Get a shadow down, play out our other shadows, say go. So now we've got not quite lethal next turn, but a reasonable chunk. So decide not to play or not to attack with the Ledger Shredder because I don't have lethal. So now if my opponent wants to kill me, they're going to have to attack, like kill the Ledger Shredder, which they could have like a Vapor Snag or something, but they're going to have to get the Ledger Shredder off the board, have enough damage rolled up for Swift Spear, and be able to stop the Terminate. And I'm kind of just banking on them not having enough stuff to do all that. So Underworld Breach, sure. Not exactly a scary graveyard to be breaching with. They've got a Swift Spear and a Soul Scar Mage, couple baubles, bunch of lands, a light up the stage with no spectacle currently. So this is like pretty low on the list of scary Underworld breaches. So they get back a Swift Spear and a bauble. That's it. They attack him with both. Decided to just block the larger one because at the end of the day, like I don't care about this Ledger Shredder. All it is chump blocking something anyway. I'm hoping that they'll commit a bunch of spells to Swift Spear, and I'll be able to just like terminate and untap and kill them, or just take a little bit of damage here, and like terminate a post combat blocker and untap and swing for lethal or something. Like maybe they were thinking I was going to block this one, put it in the graveyard, and then have like another spell and be able to spectacle light up the stage or something. But I'm kind of okay just standing in front of the bigger one. Like I said, I'm not really expecting that Ledger Shredder to be part of my winning formula there. So on to match number 5. Another lost die roll. Another 7-card unkeepable hand. 6 is a lot better. Probably just throw back a duplicate, drown in the lock. It's a little unfortunate if we're up against like Rhinos or something. All right, so mill. All right, so let's go ahead and kill the crab. So if our opponent plays a second crab, we can drown in the locket. They don't play a crab. They don't currently have drown in the lock up either. So I know I'm going to get the shredder down and I'm going to get the connive trigger off the bobble. All right. So opponent finding fractured sanities when they only have 2 lands and one of them doesn't produce blue isn't the scariest thing in the world. They go to surgical extraction, my Croxa. So I figure like if they're casting surgical extraction on my Croxa, that's got to mean it's a strong enough spell to where they either can't deal with it very effectively right now or don't want to have to. So I'm going to try to protect my Croxa. And then they play a second surgical extraction. Okay. So they get rid of all my Croxas. But this does mean that I get to Thoughtseize and Connive again. So, like, Shredder's becoming a very real clock. I'm going up to 16 cards in my yard when Thoughtseize resolves. So these visions are a little bit off. Not a ton, though. Jace is pretty annoying in the face of Ledger Shredder. So I decided to just take that. And I've got Lightning Bolt to deal with the crab. I was going to say, obviously, if they top deck like a fetch land, it would be pretty annoying for me. But now we're just going to get damage in, hold up Spell Pierce. Like, I'm not dead to a fetch land. Spell Pierce should cover most removal spells on my Ledger Shredder. If they have a Fatal Push, they'd have to have, like, land plus Fatal Push. If they have Drown, I can Spell Pierce it. If they have land and go to, like, Field of Ruin me to fix their mana and then Fatal Push, I can Spell Pierce. Or if they just play any like big mill spell, another Jace, I can Spell Pierce that. So. All right, sideboarding against mill, boarding in like all those Spell Pierces, the Fluster Storms. Board out some of these like blind draw spells like Expressive Iteration that are just drawing a whole bunch. Honestly, like the iterations aren't bad because card selection is really, really nice. But I'm bringing in like all these really good counters and I've got to cut something for them. So like Shredder, Iteration, things that just have like forced draws are a little bit weaker. And then I boarded out a Croxa. Croxa is really good, but because they're on mill, like I'm going to find Croxas in the yard. I don't really need more of them. The only other consideration would be bringing in Unlicensed Hearse. Really good against like surgical extraction, crypt incursion, stuff like that. Also can slow down your own graveyard so you're not as susceptible to Visions of Beyond. And then engineered explosives is decent if you think your opponent's going to keep a bunch of hands with like a ton of crabs, or if they're bringing in something like what's it called? Uh, Not Chalice of the Void, Ensnaring Bridge. Then EE is okay. If you're running K command, I'd definitely bring that in. We have a redraw off Bobble. We've got some interaction. We can kill some crabs. If we find a second land, then we can get Thoughtseize and Terminate. Found our second land. Just going to pass. I kind of want this expressive iteration to help me find a threat. And all right. Yawns. So fetch shock there and pass to my turn. I fetch shock a blue source so I can hold up Spell Pierce in case they have Archive Trap. If I got a Blood Crypt and went to like kill the crab, then I'd have to tap off of Spell Pierce. And I think countering an Archive Trap is a little bit more important than like killing the crab right now. Maybe that changed if they had a fetch land. But because they've already gotten like the crab value, then I don't really need to worry about like more removal on the crab. So kill the crab. Opponent fires off their Visions of Beyond into Odawara. So I'm expecting like a Tasha's. Oh, Jace. Okay. So Jace just mills and finds or draws a card. I really would have liked to expressive iteration last turn, but the fear was always if I miss my land drop and my opponent gets to untap with a Jace, I'm in a decent bit of trouble. Bobble them and see Ensnaring Bridge, which means I need to hold up Spell Pierce instead of going for the Terminate. But as soon as they fetch and I know I don't have to worry about Ensnaring Bridge, then I can go ahead and go for the kill on the crab. There's a Tasha's for 21 cards. All right, so we find a Thoughtseize. They surgical my Drowns, which fortunately we just picked one up. But their hand is just a Blood Chief's Thirst. All right, Blood Chief's Thirst, and they got a bunch of land. Cool. So I get to croaks away the Blood Chief's Thirst. They're empty-handed. Set up for like escaping Croxa next turn. Their Shelldock Isle has another Crypt Incursion. So no Croxa. They surgical my Spell Pierces. Can't do anything about that. Now we've got 4 turns. This is the first of 4 turns to get to lethal. So I fetch to see what I have available. We've got a Blood Crypt, a Bloodstained Mire, and a Thoughtseize. So if I shock in this Blood Crypt, I go up to 7 damage this turn, put them to 16. Whatever I draw next turn, if I draw the fetch land, I fetch, hit them for 8, put them to 8. If I draw the Thoughtseize, I cast that, deal them 9, put them to 7. So, like, either way, if I shock here, I win the race. So, as long as they don't draw anything. I mean, but I can't beat them drawing anything, so. And Tasha's off the top. And unfortunately, Bloodstained Mire plus Thoughtseize, I do not believe adds up to 21 CMC. On to game 3. Don't think anything's really changed up. Boarded out a Ragavan for the hearse, mainly because I saw Fatal Push, Blood Chief's Thirst, Drown in the Lock, and they've got the O3 crab, the Ruin crab or whatever. So Ragavan's not like the best. Opening 7, I think I had like one lander. Really awkward. This 6, way better. I've got double Thoughtseize. I've got Shadow. Throw back the hearse because I'm not planning on casting that anytime soon. So we see Crab, Tasha's, Fatal Push, only 2 lands. So we'll take the Crab, take the recurable mill source. So of course they top deck a Crab. You know how it goes. Thoughtseize the Fatal Push. I'm going to mill some cards to the Crab anyway, but at least getting rid of the Fatal Push means I can get Shadow down, hold up Spell Pierce for the Tashas. So here's Shadow. My opponent Surgicals my Drown in the Lock instead of my Flusterstorm, or my Spell Pierce, which is great for me because clearly I have the Spell Pierce and not the Drown in the Lock. So they'll get a little bit of free information there. But I mean, even if they know I have Spell Pierce, that doesn't mean they get to play around it for free. Ditch the Heat because I'm going to outpace this Crab. See Flusterstorm on top of their library, which is fine because they don't have the 4th land. And I'm kind of banking on the fact that if they find the 4th land and they do get to Tasha's and have Flusterstorm, I don't think they're going to have the ability to mill me out of a full like 35. Like if they find a fetch land, mill me for 6 with the Crab, I'm down to 29 cards. They Tasha's, I Spell Pierce, they Flusterstorm, then Tasha's usually hits about 20 to like 23, 24 cards. So I don't think they should be able to get like the full 29, and I should get to untap and kill them. So kind of playing the odds a little bit there. But either way, that was match number 5. Nice little 4-1 for Grixis. The only changes I would consider would be if I wanted to have a piece of land hate. If I wanted to bring back like the Alpine Moon, maybe over the second Kaito. I've really been liking Dress Down, so I don't really want to cut those. I did miss Dragon's Rage Channeler in the Tron matchup, but then again, like any threat in a matchup like Tron is really nice. We did show that you can win against Tron on a mold of 4 with Ragavan, so that's pretty cool. Otherwise, 3 Kroxa is nice. I don't think there were a lot of times that league where I saw like multiple Kroxa and didn't want them, but there were plenty of times against like Rhinos that finding the first one had a lot of value. So that's kind of been my balancing act with Kroxa. Is the second one obviously not as good as the first, but like you really want to find the first one to be able to close out games. And having access to 3 gives those lines with like Dress Down and Kroxa a lot more consistency. I could see swapping out like the Spell Pierce in the main for a Dress Down. I don't hate that. I've also thought about cutting like the Spell Pierce and maybe something else for a couple Inquisition. Maybe going down to 19 lands. Don't know yet. Haven't found like the right balance yet, but kind of like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I've really been enjoying kind of messing around with the configuration here and there. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video. We'll probably be playing Grixis a little bit more this week. Might play it in another challenge this weekend. We'll see how it goes. But other than that, yeah, have a awesome rest of your week. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.